If you think rent is expensive now, brace yourself. This is just the beginning. Across the United States, millions of people are watching their housing costs spiral out of control with no relief in sight. What was once an issue confined to major cities has now spread nationwide, squeezing the budgets of renters from all walks of life. But here's the real shocker. This crisis isn't just about supply and demand. Hidden forces are at play, quietly driving rent prices higher and pushing millions closer to financial ruin. Corporate landlords, soaring property taxes, and an economic system that seems rigged against renters, these aren't just minor factors. They're the fuel behind an affordability crisis that could reshape the American dream as we know it. So, how bad can it really get? And more importantly, how did we get here in the first place? For decades, the American dream revolved around home ownership. Buying a house wasn't just a milestone, it was a symbol of financial security and success. But today, that dream is slipping away, and in its place, a new reality has emerged. The United States has quietly become a renter nation. Right now, nearly 60% of Americans are renters, a statistic that would have been unthinkable just a few generations ago. Rising home prices, stagnant wages, and crippling student debt have made it nearly impossible for many to afford a down payment, leaving millions trapped in an endless cycle of renting. And with interest rates soaring to 20-year highs, the prospect of buying a home is even further out of reach. But here's where things get even more concerning. The rental market isn't just growing, it's becoming more expensive and predatory. Investors and corporate landlords have seized the opportunity, buying up massive swaths of housing and turning them into profit machines. The days of renting from a small, independent landlord are fading. Now, many tenants are at the mercy of faceless real estate conglomerates that prioritize profit over people. And the numbers tell a disturbing story. In 2023, a record-breaking 29.4 million households struggled with unaffordable rent, according to Harvard University's Joint Center for Housing Studies. More and more families are finding themselves spending half or more of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. That's not just inconvenient, it's a crisis. So, if renting is the new normal, why is it becoming so impossible to afford? The answer lies in the forces working behind the scenes, shaping a market that keeps prices high and renters trapped. If you think rent is high now, brace yourself, because the economic forces at play are set to push housing costs even higher. Many assume that rising rent is just a natural consequence of inflation, but the real picture is far more complicated. Inflation has made everything more expensive: food, gas, healthcare, but for renters, it's especially brutal. As landlords face higher maintenance costs, property taxes, and insurance rates, they're passing those expenses directly onto tenants. But here's the catch: wages aren't rising at the same rate. Since 2019, rents have risen 1.5 times faster than the average American paycheck. That means millions are watching their expenses skyrocket while their income remains stagnant. Meanwhile, high interest rates have made it harder for people to buy homes, forcing them to stay in the rental market longer. More demand for rentals means landlords can keep jacking up prices, knowing desperate tenants have no other choice. And in some areas, rent control laws that once protected renters have been gutted, giving landlords even more power. The result? A system where tenants are trapped, unable to save for a home or even basic necessities. And for those already struggling, the consequences are even more severe. The rental crisis isn't just making life harder, it's forcing people onto the streets. Right now, nearly 29,000 people enter homelessness every week in the United States. And here's the most shocking part: almost half of them have jobs. Take Knoxville, Tennessee, a city where rent has surged over 50% in just 4 years. It was once considered an affordable place to live, but now families are barely scraping by. People like Quanisha Tweety, a single mother who works full-time as a delivery driver, are living out of their cars. Despite working every day, she and her 3 children have been homeless for 4 months because she simply can't afford rent. And she's not alone. Seniors on fixed incomes are being forced out of their longtime homes, young professionals are giving up on ever moving out of their parents' houses, and families are crowding into single apartments just to survive. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a humanitarian crisis. And as rent prices continue to spiral, the future looks even more uncertain. If you're wondering why rent keeps going up despite wages staying flat, look no further than corporate landlords. Over the past decade, real estate investment firms have been buying up rental properties at an alarming rate. Companies like Blackstone and Invitation Homes now control hundreds of thousands of rental units nationwide. Unlike traditional landlords, these corporations operate like massive profit engines. They use AI-driven pricing algorithms to set rent rates, squeezing out every possible dollar from tenants. And because they own such a large share of the market, they can raise rents without fear of losing tenants. Because where else are people supposed to go? The consequences are devastating. When a corporation buys up an apartment complex, rents typically spike by 20 to 40% within the first year. Maintenance is neglected, hidden fees pile up, and eviction rates soar. And with their massive lobbying power, these companies have successfully blocked renter protection laws in multiple states. The result? A system that's designed to keep renters powerless. With all of these forces working against renters, it's easy to feel hopeless. But while systemic change is needed, there are still strategies that can help people navigate this crisis. Negotiate your rent. Many landlords are willing to lower rent if you sign a longer lease. It never hurts to ask. Look beyond major cities. Smaller towns and suburbs still offer relatively affordable rent compared to metro areas. Consider rent assistance programs. Many cities and states offer financial help for struggling renters. Research local options. Know your tenant rights. In many states, landlords cannot raise rent or evict tenants without proper notice. Knowing your rights can prevent being taken advantage of. But these small fixes won't solve the bigger problem. The reality is, renter protections, affordable housing investment, and corporate regulation are the only real solutions to this crisis. And until those changes happen, millions of Americans will remain trapped in a system that's built to exploit them. So, the question remains, how long can this continue before the entire system collapses? Because if something doesn't change soon, we might be looking at a future where housing is no longer a right, but a luxury only the wealthy can afford.